It was December 3rd, 2007, and I was in a place I never dreamed in a million years I would be, high on Mount Vincent in Antarctica. I was in the middle of the coldest and windiest place on Earth, a place so remote that I might as well have been on the moon. I remember looking at the sleeping bag next to me, and all I could see of my wife, Julie, was the very top of her wool hat. It was 40 below outside our tent, and it felt that cold inside. While we tried to sleep, water would evaporate off our bodies and form big ice crystals on the ceiling of our tent. And when the sun would move from behind those mountains, the air would start to warm, and those crystals would fall, covering us in snow. Now, just getting to this point was a monumental struggle for the two of us. Fighting for oxygen in the thin air, sometimes having to take 5 breaths for every step. The truth is, we wanted to quit and go home. And we probably would have, but I couldn't talk Julie into telling our guide. I wasn't going to tell him. We nicknamed him the Little General. And Phil, if you're watching, I apologize. But this was not a man you wanted to disappoint. So we did the only thing we knew to do. We just kept putting one foot in front of the other for the next several days, and we made it to high camp. And from there, we strapped on our crampons, grabbed our ice axes, and with huge knots in our stomach, we headed out for the summit. I was scared. I was cold, and I was miserable. And I asked myself the question, how did I get here? I guess I could ask myself the same question today. How did I get here on this red circle? Because if you had told me 8 years ago I would be here today speaking to you and asked me to guess the topic, the last thing I would have said was mountain climbing. You see, I didn't grow up camping or hiking. I wasn't even a Boy Scout. For the first 50 years of my life, I can't remember doing one single thing that would be considered dangerous or adventurous. But through a series of small steps, I find myself today standing here in the middle of the most unlikely scenario imaginable, on a quest to try to climb the 7 summits, the highest mountain on every continent. Now, my journey started on Mount Kilimanjaro in 2006. Julie and I had heard some friends talking about climbing Kilimanjaro, and it must have lit a spark because without giving it much thought, we booked a trip to Tanzania. Our guide was constantly reminding us on that first day to go slowly, to acclimatize to the altitude. Pole, pole, he kept repeating, the Swahili word for slowly, slowly. Now, moving methodically for the next 6 days, we eventually made it to the summit of the highest mountain in Africa and one of the world's 7 summits. Now, Julie had run a marathon, and she'll be happy to tell you about that, whether you ask her or not. But make no mistake, this was the hardest thing we had ever done times 100. We didn't realize it at the time, but the Kilimanjaro climb started us on a path that would fundamentally change our lives. With a naive confidence, we decided to see how many of the 7 summits we could climb together, never expecting to get to the big mountains. But over the next 3 years, we made it to the summit of the highest peaks in Europe, Australia, Antarctica, and South America. Now, each expedition was a unique and new challenge, and it pushed us to our limits. Thousands and thousands of steps led to breathtaking views, but more importantly, to immeasurable feelings of accomplishment. Now, we were always the least experienced climber on every mountain, but somehow, through a combination of stubbornness and a lot of luck, we managed to summit the first 5 together. It was then we turned our attention to Denali in Alaska, the highest mountain in North America. Now, as much as I wanted to summit Denali, I knew that success on this mountain would lead to a decision about the big one, Mount Everest, and that scared me. I had read Into Thin Air. Failure, on the other hand, would give me an excuse never to have to make that decision. Now, Julie and I made it to Camp 4, but it was obvious we were way over our head. The most technical and dangerous part of the climb was still ahead, and we were exhausted. So we turned around. It was the first time we'd ever failed on a climb. And I remember those steps down the mountain just felt like they were taking me farther and farther from my goal. I'd clearly taken a step backward. Now, Julie will tell you, for her, it's always been more about the journey than the summit. While I was miserable about turning around, she was just happy being on the glacier. In fact, she'll tell you that last night in our tent, listening to the sound of the distant avalanches echoing through the mountain range was one of the greatest days of her life. But all I could do was obsess over what went wrong and what I could have done differently. I think Julie was content because she realized she had given it her all. She had climbed her Everest. But deep down, I knew I could have trained harder. So I went back and summited Denali the next year, and I regained my lost steps. Fast forward to April 2013. I just arrived at Camp 1 on Mount Everest after making my way through one of the most dangerous sections of the climb, the Khumbu Icefall. It was day 30 of our expedition, and I had had some rough days, but I was finally starting to feel confident. I remember high-fiving my teammates at Camp 1, and I was so excited because the next day was supposed to be one of the easy days. But just 30 minutes into the climb, I knew something was terribly wrong. My team was moving further and further ahead of me. I was losing ground, and there was nothing I could do. I remember my brain telling my legs to move faster, but they simply wouldn't go. By the time I made it to Camp 2, my teammates had been there for hours. I had no strength and no appetite, and the realization that my Everest dream was over was starting to sink in. When our team made it back down to base camp, I was so discouraged that I actually gave away a lot of my gear because I wanted nothing to do with Mount Everest again, and I knew I would never go back. But Everest has a way of not letting you go. For the next 3 months, I would go to sleep thinking about Everest, and I would wake up thinking about Everest. I tried to let it go, but I couldn't. So I signed up to go back in 2014, and this time I was going to be ready. I went through a pretty intense fitness evaluation, and when my new trainer handed me my plan, I thought he was kidding. 3 to 5 hours of workouts a day for 7 months. At home, I would sleep in a high-altitude chamber that would restrict my oxygen and trick my body into thinking I was at 20,000 feet. Someday, the plan called for me to strap on a weighted backpack and spend 5 straight hours on the stair machine. Now, I got some funny looks at the gym. And those first 2 months were brutal. But once I started feeling the improvement, I actually started looking forward to the workouts, and I never thought I would say that. And by April, I felt prepared and was eager to return. And my 3 duffel bags were packed when I received the call telling me that our expedition had been canceled. A 30 million pound block of ice had broken loose in the Khumbu Icefall, killing 16 Sherpa climbers. Now, the Sherpa climbers, the true heroes of Everest, they do all the work. They no longer had any desire to climb, and you cannot climb Everest without them. The mountain was telling them to go home, and they did. Now, I had spent months preparing for the climb, but nothing prepared me for the disappointment. And I felt guilty, feeling sorry for myself, when I knew that others had lost so much more. So for 2 or 3 days, I was just in shock. And when that wore off, the thought of training for a whole nother year was really something that was hard to imagine. But ultimately, I decided I'd taken far too many steps to give up. So I'll be going back to Everest in April. Now, regardless what happens this year, one thing's for sure. From those first steps on Kilimanjaro, Julie and I had changed. It wasn't a well thought out plan. It was really more of an accident. But somewhere along the journey, we realized we're no longer tourists, we're adventurers. And we liked the way that felt. While life transformations often happen when a person hits rock bottom, ours happen gradually and unexpectedly. Our climbing expeditions brought us closer, made us more of a team, and made us stronger, which better enabled us to handle other challenges going on in our life. I learned that radical change can come without totally disrupting your current life, that each step, regardless of how small, can ultimately lead to something huge. Now, training for a climb isn't easy, and the climb itself, at times can be miserable, but it's all been worth it. Sometimes I wonder who I would be today if I hadn't taken those first steps on Kilimanjaro. I look back at my first 50 years and wonder how many opportunities did I let slip away? How many steps could I have taken but didn't? And then I think about all the steps I still have ahead of me, and I'm so thankful that I didn't wait until it was too late to get started. What opportunities are ahead of you that you're not seeing? And when your spark comes, will you be willing to take that first step? Don't let the fact that you're comfortable rob you of what could be a life-changing adventure. I challenge you to be listening and watching. And when you feel it, take that first step immediately. Don't give yourself time to talk yourself out of it. Now, maybe you'll climb Everest one day. Don't laugh. Or maybe your Everest will be running that marathon, getting that extra degree, maybe starting your own business, or writing that novel that's always been inside of you. There's an Everest out there for you just waiting to be climbed. When it calls, you have to find the courage to take that first small step. Are you ready? Thank you.